How's it going, everyone? David from dodmedia. Today we're having a look at my new editing workstation powerhouse. This 3XS workstation, packed with AMD's Ryzen 9 5950X 16-core processor, NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 380 Ti graphics card, 128GB of RAM to throw at After Effects, multiple high-capacity M2 internal drives for a bottleneck-free workflow, all on a ProArt B550 Creator motherboard, which features Thunderbolt 4, as well as oodles of high-speed ports. If none of that made any sense to you, don't worry. It doesn't really make any sense to me either. What does make sense, though, is that this thing will bring my production speed to the next level. Now, before I get started, I want to thank Scan Pro Video from scan.co.uk and AMD for sponsoring this episode. Scan Pro Video reached out to me after following the channel for a while apparently, and asked if I'd like to review one of the 3XS powerhouse workstations they sell. Now, there's no payment for this video, but I do get to keep the workstation, and you'll see throughout this video why I'm very, very happy about that. So first up, how is it different to the other workstation I built myself? That was around the time that I made the move from Apple to PC as well. Now, that workstation, even then, wasn't using the top of the range components. It had an Intel i7 6800K 6-core processor, a GTX 1070 GPU, and 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM. And my storage ranged across some M2 drives and some mediocre SSDs. In the last couple of years, I've definitely noticed that Premiere Pro will get a little bit sluggish during edits, during playback, rendering effects, and running exports, which is a big issue for me. Without having to spend a lot of time in storage making proxies for a smoother edit, that was becoming a bit of a bottleneck. And After Effects similarly required me to drop that adaptive resolution down lower and lower to get the responsiveness I wanted. Generally speaking, the whole system just got more burdened as I threw bigger and more complex files at it. So when Alistair from scan.co.uk reached out and said he'd followed the channel for ages and his team were looking for a UK-based content creator to have some hands-on time with this beast, and he sent me the spec sheet, I'm not gonna lie, I drooled a little bit. It just packs such a punch on paper. And the great thing about these 3XS systems is that while yes, they are pre-built workstations, they're pre-built and tested by a professional video team. So every choice of hardware that goes in there is made without compromise on performance. If you walk into, PC World or Curry's or whatever wholesale retailer of electronic goods you have right now, and you look at their range of computers, they'll mostly be targeting gamers, and they'll be assembled using parts that can cover as wide a range of uses as possible, meaning that there will be compromises on hardware selection. But here, that's not the case. Everything works optimally together, and the team even do stress tests and benchmark tests before sending the workstation out to you to make sure that your particular workstation is tuned perfectly, has the best drivers for all of the hardware in there. Okay, it's enough chit chat. Let's get down to brass tacks. Let's compare these two workstations, my old one, which I have running now, and the new one, which I'll switch to in a little bit using this little KVM switch that I installed. Now, I've got two projects lined up. One of them is heavy on video, one of them is heavy on animation. These are two client projects which have been wrapped up and which I'm allowed to share. Now, I compiled all of these using the project manager in Premiere Pro so that they would all be sort of in one place, all of the assets in one place, so it was easy to place them on both of them. So they are basically running the exact same thing on different machines. So if you want a tutorial on how to do that, it's up there. All right, let's see how these compare. Let's see if it's even gonna be a comparison. We're gonna be looking at sort of scrubbing, playing back, basically user experience within Premiere Pro, how well it plays back, how many frames we drop every time we hit play, every time there's a cut. We're also going to be looking at export times, both directly in Premiere Pro and when we send it to Adobe Media Encoder. Okay, so this first project is for an offshore wind company, and it has a lot of different kinds of video in it. I mean, this thing really put this machine through the runner, because it goes from like 720 8-bit all the way up to 6K 12-bit, and just a wide variety of different codecs and formats. So it was pretty processor heavy in that regard. And then all of it has some color correction, there's a bit of stabilization going on, and pretty heavy live automated audio effects as well. So let's have a look and see, first of all, on the old workstation, we're at half resolution, because realistically it's not going to play back in full resolution.
What does it take to build an offshore wind farm that pushes the limits of industry standards? One that requires us to reimagine offshore wind. It takes a team, a determined team.
I mean, that's just not smooth at all. Let's drop this down to a quarter resolution and see if that changes it.
What does it take to build an offshore wind farm that pushes the limits of industry standards? One that
still getting a lot of frames dropped here. Let's have a look at some of the animated parts.
The 257 megawatt
is really struggling.
State-of-the-art motion compensated pile gripper.
It's now stuck on this media cache preview. So, okay, well, basically preview there sucks. Okay, so now it's loaded up on the new workstation, the Ryzen workstation. So let's stick it to half resolution and let's see how this goes.
What does it take to build an offshore wind farm that pushes the limits of industry standards? One that requires us to reimagine offshore wind.
Not a single dropped frame so far.
It takes a team, a determined team of experts leveraging years of experience and a common mission.
Okay, one drop frame there where I removed the logo from someone's jumper.
To the next level. And it takes innovation.
Stabilized footage.
For Arcadis Ost 1, the 257
animated
megawatt
map.
Offshore wind farm in Germany. Parkwind partnered with Deme Offshore, Harima, and Vestas.
So it's just taken that map, which is a dynamically linked After Effects composition, which has a lot of effects going on in it. It's got a sort of griddler effect to give this kind of halftone look. It's got some vector icons. It's got a texture that's being tiled, and then it has motion blur, and it's zooming in, and it has some animated components to it. And it didn't even drop a frame on there. It literally just churned through those previews in After Effects in the background without dropping a single frame.
The 257 megawatt offshore wind farm.
I can't actually believe that. How's our processor looking while we're playing all of this back? I mean, the processor has, a few little peaks, but it's never really gone over 60% yet. Let's see if we can go full on this.
For Arcadis Ost 1, the 257 megawatt offshore wind farm in Germany.
In full resolution, it's just playing it back 1-to-1. There's not a single drop frame. Even the animated content. Okay, one drop frame there. 2 drop frames. Still. If you've worked with After Effects and Premiere Pro together, where you're using Dynamic Link instead of rendering stuff out of After Effects and importing it as a video file, I mean, you'll know that sometimes Dynamic Link, it's not that reliable. You get a lot of frame droppage because what you're asking After Effects to do is provide previews on the fly. But this is quite incredible. And scrubbing through, I mean, despite all of these different file formats, different resolutions, different compressions, different codecs, it scrubs through really smoothly. And a lot of these are like H.264, H.265. So really it's quite incredible that it can just handle it. Okay, let's go ahead and queue this one up for export as well. So same settings, 2pass 2540, let's queue it. Okay, and let's export it directly through Premiere Pro. Exports, all right. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, but as you can see, the old workstation couldn't even finish the export. It met a compiling error, probably because it had so many different codecs and formats thrown at it, and the processor got overwhelmed and it couldn't churn through it. Well, the AMD workstation absolutely churned through that. That 2-pass export was just crazy fast. So let's go ahead and set up for the media encoder exports this time. Now, my experience with media encoder is that it's a little bit more temperamental than exporting directly from Premiere Pro. So if we had an error compiling through Premiere Pro on the old workstation, my gut tells me it's going to have an error compiling in media encoder. But let's wait and find out. So let's launch these and do a side-by-side comparison. So there we could see that the difference between the two workstations was, I mean, just night and day in terms of being able to handle all those different formats, those different codecs, those different resolutions, all on a timeline with effects. I think the thing that tripped up my old workstation was rendering a 6K clip that had warp stabilizer and color correction on it. It was just too much for it. It couldn't handle it, which is surprising because I've not had that issue before with it. It might just be that this current boot up that I've got, it's just not quite handling it. But that being said, the sluggishness, that's nothing new. That's what I talked about before. And so seeing how the new workstation, the 3XS workstation, absolutely ripped through that, I wasn't expecting to be that impressed when doing a side-by-side comparison, but I am. I'm kind of blown away. Okay, so this project, second project, is also some client work that I did, which is pretty much all in After Effects. The only thing that's in Premiere Pro is then a music and voiceover track, which I applied there, and a tiny bit of branding. But otherwise, everything is happening within After Effects, within compositions, within compositions, within compositions. It's all using shape layers and some vector images from Illustrator brought in. So you can actually see as I'm talking here, After Effects is slowly building up that preview cache, just so that it has it. It does it automatically in the background now. You don't have to press spacebar or 0 to RAM preview. If I scrub along, all the stuff that's cached obviously is going to play really nicely, but as soon as we get to what's not cached, there we drop down to an 1/8 adaptive resolution. Okay, I mean, it's still, you know, considering it's got motion blur and that it's using a lot of different vector assets, it's working quite smoothly just at a very low adaptive resolution. If we head over to Premiere Pro,
the power to make decisions about sexuality and reproduction is fundamental to women's empowerment overall. Yet,
I mean, we're getting a lot of dropped frames despite the fact that we have that rendered preview. I mean, it's just really not smooth, and I wouldn't expect it to be, because again, this is using dynamic link, so everything is live. It's not pre-rendered and then sent over. So, okay, and now looking at the AMD 3XS workstation, unsurprisingly, while I was doing the review of the old workstation, the new workstation has just gone ahead and RAM previewed the entire sequence for me, so this should be just smooth as anything throughout the entire thing. Didn't ask it to do that, but it did it anyway. So let's just go ahead and purge that, because I kind of want it to be a little bit more fair. All right, so now clean slate, nothing is RAM previewed. So again, scrubbing through, we get an adaptive resolution of 1/8, but it's a lot more smooth in terms of showing that preview. It's not choppy like it was before. You can almost get a smooth playback just at a very low resolution. Now, if I just hit play on the timeline, if we go to our info, we're getting about 6.5 frames per second in render time. I don't know if I did that for the other one. I'm not sure I did. It would be a lot less than that. So let's head over to Premiere Pro and let's try and drop it down to quarter resolution again. And let's see.
the power to make decisions about sexuality and reproduction is fundamental to women's empowerment overall.
We're getting some dropped frames,
Millions of women and adolescent
but overall,
girls want to avoid
that is way smoother.
and not using safe and effective contraception.
That's smooth enough for me to be able to add subtitles or voiceover in sync with the animation without having to drop markers to then look at the time code and match that in After Effects. I could do that live directly in Premiere Pro, so that's a huge time saver. I mean, just overall, it's way faster to snap to where I am in that comp in After Effects through Dynamic Link. So again, massive time saver. Okay, let's go ahead and queue this one up. So the question is it worth the money to buy this sort of workstation? I would say it depends on your situation. If, like me, you already have a workstation and you're looking to upgrade its performance a little bit without doing a complete new build, and you know a little bit about PC mods, then I'd say you might be better off looking at individual component upgrades, which you probably already knew if you're watching this. It'll certainly be cheaper to buy, say, the Ryzen 9 processor and a new motherboard that'll work with it, like the ProArt B550 Creator, if you've already got a decent GPU and RAM, so long as they're also compatible with the MOBO and the CPU. That's sort of the beauty of PCs versus Macs, is you can easily upgrade certain aspects as you go without having to splash all the cash in one go on a new machine like you would with a Mac. But if you're looking to get a new machine entirely, or you're transitioning over from Mac to PC like I decided to, or you're just not so hot on building a workstation yourself and handling components, which is also fine, then I'd say it's well worth considering a system like this, which is assembled by a team and tested by a team of video professionals using hardware that will future-proof you for many, many years to come. Because let's face it, over the last 6 years, we've gone from, glorifying a camera that can shoot 4K 8-bit 60 FPS to expecting it as an absolute minimum. We've seen raw video become more accessible, and more complex formats like H.265 become more commonplace as well, and they need workstations that have some oomph to play nicely with without having to make proxies. Now, don't get me wrong, proxies are a great solution if your machine is slower. I made a tutorial about them. That side. Made a tutorial about them, which you can see there if you're interested. But the problem I have with proxies is that instead of spending money on better hardware, you're just moving the problem along and you're spending it on time and storage. And arguably, my time to achieve a task as a video editor is worth more, or at least should be. In any case, I'm incredibly happy to have had this opportunity to run a comparison and see just how much time I was losing every time I opened Premiere or After Effects to do some work. That all adds up to hours, possibly days lost working on a slower machine. Is that time worth the value of the workstation and the time you'll save going forward? I'll let you decide that one for yourselves. Let me know down in the comments what system you're running, what your dream setup would look like. And if you made it this far, start your comment with, "Holy moly goodness, that's fast." All right, if you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.